106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
Good evening, Chicago. It's your news brother from the north side, not the south side, Jerry Vasilatos, welcoming you to another Friday night edition of Chicago Corner. We have a good show lined up for you all tonight. A lot of stories to talk about. Before we dive right into it, I hope you're all having a good week, staying safe everywhere. And I would like to welcome to the show tonight, returning to the show tonight, we're going to call her Sister Lainie Petersen of the Blessed Shroud, since we got the whole news brother thing going on here. Lainie Petersen.
How you doing?
I'm great. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me and other fellow venerable news brother, Mr. Edward Heller.
I would like 4 fried chickens and the Coke, please. Oh, wait, this is a live chat, not a restaurant.
I thought that
and your toast, the whole loaf of bread toasted, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah.
4 fried chicken and some dry white toast.
Dry white toast.
Yes. Once again, I know that I guess our Rokfin is live. I thought I activated. It still says live stream will start soon. Are you seeing anything on that end?
Yeah, I think somebody got to hit that thing in the side with a hammer and get it going again or something.
Because when we were doing Tuesday's show, Kit jumped into the chat and said, I have to click go live, but I already set up. People are currently waiting here. I wonder if there's, oh boy.
We'll fix it later.
Okay. Here, I think everything's going.
We got one live stream working. That'll do for now.
That's right. So let's see who's joined us tonight in the chat. We've got Arturo Medina. Good evening. We've got Uncle Warren, Extra Bulla. We've got Kathy Powers. Yes, Kathy, it's true. It's true, everybody. We do owe Kathy one of these from last Tuesday because she gave us a $1 super chat right at the end of the show. So we are obligated as we dance for dollars here for Kathy's super chats to provide this in return. Now, as I was curating stories tonight, there was some chatter about Lori Lightfoot going down to Mexico. I guess that, she's got some business down there that she wants to tend to bring back to Chicago. Don't know what that is. We always have.
You know what it is. It's Lori wants to go on vacation, and so let's make an excuse to visit one of our sister cities. Mexico City is another one of our sister cities, along with what was it? Moscow, and what was the other one? Kyiv. I think both of those are actually sister cities.
Isn't Ukraine a sister city to Chicago also?
Well, that's a whole country.
I'm sorry, sister country. Yeah. Well, all right. So we got no Lori news tonight, other than giving Kathy her dollar's worth there. And let's see who else is in the chat. KR Moscow is a former sister city. Yeah. Extra bullish. She's going to fly the cocaine plane.
Yeah, it's not former. It's still a sister city. I don't care what the politicians got a problem up their shorts with. It's still a sister city.
Yeah. Yeah, so welcome everybody. We got about 7 people in the live chat right now. Why don't we jump into our first story, which I just we are all in agreement. This is just crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Let me dive into the story to share, because we all have some interesting takes on it. This is as reported by Joe Ward at Block Club Chicago. Rogers Park Tent City residents served fake eviction notices that promised to move them to fancy hotel. Quote, "Don't do that to us." The notices impersonated Alderman Maria Hadden and falsely told Toohey Park residents they would be moved to the Four Seasons. A student who has ties to aldermanic candidate Bill Morton claimed responsibility. Now that's where this story gets,
Weird, even
a
weirder.
little bit murky. Yeah, because the reasons behind why she says she did it we'll get to. But then when you see she's got ties to aldermanic candidate Bill Morton, everything just starts to get
Hanky. What does that mean, Vince? Hanky.
Oh, strange.
Weird. Well, why don't you say strange or weird? I mean, hanky, that has no meaning.
We say hanky.
I don't want you guys using words around me that got no meaning.
So going back to the Block Club Chicago article, the one-page notice that was distributed titled, actually, I'm sorry, I missed a paragraph. Residents of a far north side tent city were given fake eviction notices this week as part of an apparent stunt from a college student linked to a political gadfly challenging the incumbent alderman. The one-page notice is titled Maria Hadden's 5-day notice to vacate were stuffed into belongings. Talk about really violating people's privacy, and posted on signs in and around Toohey Park at 7348 North Paulina Street. Residents said they were dated September 27th and listed the name of Hadden, a 49th ward alderperson, in bold blue type over a line reading, quote, landlord agent. The notice says Toohey Park residents have 5 days to leave and clear the area of all buildings, sheds, closets, outbuildings, garages, barns, and other structures used in connection with said premises. It also says residents will be relocated for free to the Four Seasons Hotel in the Gold Coast. Their stay at the hotel at 120 East Delaware Place would be open-ended for as long as it takes, now here's the political slant, for Maria Hadden to find you appropriate housing, the notice states. And that this is going to speak to something that Lainie had shared. She has some insights about. The notices were completely fake, and Hadden was not involved with them in any way, she said. The notices say they were served by Bill Morton, president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce and candidate for 49th Ward Alderman. Sarah Lim, a DePaul University freshman who is considering a run for mayor, is listed as the document's affiant, or someone who files an affidavit. Residents said they did not see the person who distributed the flyers. Lim said she was solely responsible for the fake eviction notices. Morton denied having any involvement. Lim and Morton have worked, of course he did. Lim and Morton have worked together on previous political efforts, Morton said. Some of the residents packed up their belongings in response to the flyers, encouraged by the notice, telling them they would be put up in a fancy hotel, but by Wednesday they learned they were being duped. The fake notices did not come from Hadden's office or any city agency, Hadden confirmed. We found out today that everything was a lie, said Brandon Dotson, resident of the tent city. And why should we even have people living in this tent city? We were ready to go. Don't do that to us. That's bogus. These are folks who are actively participating, trying to get housing through the city's process, Hadden said. They were really upset by this. It's not funny. Hadden said she was referring the fake notices to the city's law department and to her personal attorney. It wasn't immediately clear whether the flyers are illegal. Morton said he has assisted Lim in her possible run for mayor. The college student sought his help in getting on the mayoral ballot and other aspects of her prospective campaign. Lim appeared this week on the radio program produced by Morton and his associate Trudy Long. In the interview on WZRD-FM, Lim signaled she is rethinking her possible mayoral run. Good idea. Lim told a Block Club reporter in text messages she was solely responsible for the flyers. I think someone's getting tossed under the bus. I do have a plan for the homeless problem there, and this was a publicity stunt to drive traffic to my site where I am hoping to discuss it, Lim said. Morton had nothing to do with it. I hope he's not mad at me. Now, I did an extensive search for this website. It doesn't exist. There's no website to promote. She doesn't have a mayoral campaign website up. And now if she did, she pulled it down. Maybe she did, and it's gone now. But I did Google search and I did Wayback Machine. Well, Wayback Machine didn't really work because I don't know what her website name is, but I could find no No evidence of this website. Morton said he was not at all responsible for the eviction notices. What a horrible prank, Morton said. It seems like a prank. I had nothing to do with it. Does this guy look like the cat who swallowed the canary?
Lord. Okay.
All right, let me wrap up the last couple paragraphs here. The false eviction notice is the latest controversy surrounding the Toohey Park Tent City. Earlier this month, the Park District closed the Toohey Park Fieldhouse and moved programs to neighboring facilities in response to the growing tent city. The Toohey Park tent encampment popped up in summer of 2021 as the coronavirus pandemic caused a housing crisis and increase in homelessness. Its numbers have ebbed and flowed. In November, the city relocated more than 20 residents, only 20, into housing. Since the camp formed, 64 residents have been matched with housing, Haddon said previously. Despite those efforts, the camp's population swelled again this summer. Talk of the encampment has dominated conversation in Rogers Park social media groups, town halls, and meetings over proposed men's shelter in the neighborhood. The conversation has been ripe with mudslinging and falsehoods.
Mm-hmm.
A public meeting regarding the Toohey Park Tent City will be held Monday. The encampment and issues of homelessness have also factored heavily in the upcoming aldermanic race in Rogers Park. Look at this guy here. He didn't have anything to do with anything, allegedly. In a previous interview, Morton said he had no involvement in posting flyers around the neighborhood that opposed the men's shelter, which contained falsehoods about the project, despite some neighbors claiming on social media they saw him do so. This is Morton's second run for the Rogers Park ward office. The election is February 28th. In 2019, Haddon and then incumbent Joe Moore contested Morton's candidacy, and he was booted from the ballot. He ran as a write-in candidate. Haddon won and is now running for re-election. Morton also ran for 49th Ward Committee person and lost to Representative Kelly Cassidy, garnering 70% of the vote. Morton said he believes the city should work to find housing for Toohey Park's residents so it can reopen the park and provide services there. This is a people issue, he said. I don't believe they belong in the park. I think they need attention in a safe way. That I agree with. The means to accomplish that, if it had anything to do with him inspiring this DePaul student running for mayor, is completely boneheaded, abusive, and really takes advantage of exploiting the vulnerable population in this tent city to score political points. Lainie.
This is just, okay, so this is not far from where I live, not far from where you live even Jerry. And yeah, I mean, I have noticed the tent city, there's been tent cities coming up all over Chicago for a while now, in a variety of parks. And it has become a bone of real contention, particularly between neighbors. And I actually think that is politically motivated. I think that our older creatures, and by the way, as far as I'm concerned, if you are a Chicago politician, if you are an older creature, I by default think you're a bad person until you prove to me otherwise. And that's my position, and that's where I'm sticking with that. As far as I am concerned, the current strategy is to allow these homeless encampments to grow, to become more of an issue, and for neighbors to snipe at each other. The neighbors who say, look, we want our park back, we want our viaducts back, we have some real concerns. Another group of neighbors come against them and say that you are a bunch of elitist, entitled, privileged people. These are our unhoused neighbors, and we should not have a problem with this. And the other neighbors come back and said, this is our property, this is public property. People don't have a right to live there. We've got people fighting each other, and the older creatures get to laugh all their way to the bank. So that's my take on what's going on here in many ways. So as far as I am concerned, this is a problem that has been 50 years in the making, when they began the deinstitutionalization of the mentally ill. And the idea was that they were going to provide care for people in the community, in communities, and that didn't happen. It never happened. And you have whole groups of people now who have succumbed to mental illness, to various addictions, who have not received support. You have also the proliferation of so-called homeless shelters, which people who do not have homes will tell you flat out oftentimes are dangerous. Very seldom do these shelters provide the kind of housing or services that people need if they're trying to work. I've known people who have lived in these shelters who have said they have degenerative back conditions, and they're put on a thin mattress that's destroying their back. They have mental health issues, and they can't get a full night's sleep because they're in a room with 20 other people And they could, they have to be, they're woken up at 5 a.m, allowed to go to bed, and it lights out at 10. They're not getting a full night's sleep. The shelter system doesn't work. The mental health system institutions, they don't work. And of course, we can't, if putting people in jail or prison is not a solution because they don't work. So people congregate in these tent cities, and then the neighbors get upset because our public areas, the commons, are being taken over for purposes for which they were not intended. Neighbors fight each other. The older creatures and the politicians can pontificate. And meanwhile, this problem, the very real problem of people who are extremely vulnerable and who are having real difficulty caring for themselves, just continues to explode. And this is a problem going back. This is decades of neglect. This is a problem that's been, in my opinion, manufactured. And now we're seeing, in this case, an idiot college student who has decided to exploit this for reasons. I mean, at this point, not only do I think that her actions are stupid, they're bordering on sociopathic. I don't know who she is.
Interesting that comment, because someone in Reddit brought up the same thing. If people think exploiting the vulnerable this way is a way to get attention, they're sociopaths because they've got no empathy to understanding how they're using these people.
Well, and she's saying things like, "I hope that Bill Morton isn't angry with me." I mean, again, there's this
more important to her.
Yeah, that there's a complete. I mean, in fact, if Bill Morton is not in on this, and I have no idea whether he is or he isn't, to make that statement indicates that she has no understanding of human psychology. What has done here is plain evil. All right, to confuse and distress these people who are living there because they have no other good options. And don't tell me that they do, because they don't. They need housing. They need permanent housing, and they need supports and structure so they can live out the rest of their lives in dignity. And the fact that this young woman did this is frankly indicative of the fact that she's a person without morals. And by Chicago, on one hand, I'm kind of laughing about it because even by Chicago standards, this is insane. But on the other hand, this is an indicative of the way people are just perfectly willing to use a highly vulnerable population for their own means, whether they are older creatures who are trying to shame constituents for calling and complaining or using them for political points, or whether you've got a young people who are pranking and harassing these people. There have been some real issues. There have been some shootings over at Toohey Park. I know that there's been some issues with some of the high school students nearby taunting the people there. This is an example of, we would say, man's inhumanity to man, whether it's men or women's inhumanity to each other. This is barbarism.
Yeah, absolutely. Lainie, we were chatting about this before the show in text messaging, and you had mentioned when I shared the story with you last night, or we were talking about shows we're going to cover at the top. You said you commented to me in the text messaging that this student is showing an absurd lack of judgment. To which I responded, those are perfect candidates for a Chicago mayoral candidate. So maybe she's onto something.
Well, you have to have a certain level of obliviousness to be a politician these days, as far as I'm concerned. But the more that I'm looking at this is that this is sick. This is sociopathic. And it's doing nothing.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but before we jump too far into the sociopathic analysis, we have to understand that this kid is 17.
I don't care.
Okay? Their brain's Their brain's not fully formed.
She's a student at DePaul, though, Ed. She should know better. That's an institution of higher learning. And apparently,
the homeless. No.
This came out of a class where I guess roughly. My rough reading was it was from a class where a professor, I guess, may have been indulging her aspirations to run for mayor at 17. I can't even find a picture of this kid because she's she's not yet an adult, and I don't want to dox her. But when we have her name and she's talking about what she did, and we don't even know what she looks like, she doesn't have this website that she claims she was trying to direct attention to. Not that that's any kind of an excuse for doing this. I'm sorry, she is an entitled student who was brought up badly and definitely has sociopathic tendencies. Because you know what, Ed? There's a lack of an empathy gene. I know kids who are 17 who've got empathy. They're doing stuff. I guess when we talk about sociopathy, it's the empathy gene and relating, which she clearly can't do because she's more focused on whether or not she pissed off Morton than the actual consequences of somebody went through people's personal belongings to scare them out of that park and didn't think twice about how it would affect them.
And to copy an eviction form, to actually go to all this trouble. I mean, unless this person doesn't actually exist, and now I'm beginning to wonder about that and whether, this is somebody's imagination. I have no idea. But whoever did this is incredibly cruel. It's incredibly callous. It's getting cold out there. This is the time of year when people really are going to be needing housing. And to do this is horrible. And to see this turning into this political fracas, when in fact it is absolutely critical for this city and for this country to figure out, to go back and say, look, we made serious mistakes half a century ago. And we've got an entrenched problem. It's probably going to take us decades to get out of, but we cannot be kicking this around for political points. We cannot be pitting neighbors against each other over this. This is not an appropriate situation. And we need to work on getting affordable housing, providing mental health care and drug rehab programs to prevent homelessness, rather than trying to clean up after the fact. And I can also tell you this situation with these tent cities in some areas is actually becoming more serious. I can tell you that they're nearby in a neighboring area. There is a tent city that has emerged right next to a high school, along a kind of a river, along the river. It turns out that many of the people who are living there, according to some neighbors who have spoken to them, believe that they can claim squatters' rights on the land, which is not the case. But what they are also doing is that they do not have any sanitary facilities. They are using buckets for toileting, and then they're dumping the contents into the river. That's an environmental problem. That's a very serious environmental problem. In fact, in San Francisco right now, they are having a massive problem with toxic algae blooms because of runoff from treated sewage water. And that's causing a major environmental problem there. Imagine with untreated sewage, what could be happening there. It's serious. We've got people who are living there who are confused, and this is an environmental issue. And one of the problems is that people have been trying to call city officials, and city officials are saying, one set of city officials is saying, well, this is under this department's jurisdiction. Then they're turning around and say, well, actually, it's another department's jurisdiction, so the police can't do anything about it. And everybody's passing the buck. Nobody seems to know who's supposed to be in control of city public property or county property. That is what's happening. And meanwhile, we've got people out there who are in danger of freezing. We've got environmental issues. And we've got a bunch of people who have who are very vulnerable, who are not receiving the treatment that they need. This is what's happening in what is supposed to be a world-class city.
And that's the bottom line. The fact that there's no attention on that.
Yeah.
You want to talk about some spirited conversation regarding the homeless issue, and our elected representatives. Friend of the show, Kathy Powers, got into quite a spirited exchange with soon-to-be retiring Alderman James Kappelman over on Twitter. If you want to check out the back, and you know what, Kappelman was responsive, and on every point, Kathy was able to counter him regarding how he was passing the buck, Lainie, what you're referencing. Kathy's Twitter is at 2powers1. That's the at symbol 2 spelled 2 TWO powers 1. I would recommend everybody check out what was going on Twitter between Kathy and Alderman Kappelman. And if you want to chime in also to Alderman Kappelman, who was passing the buck regarding how people were being rehoused after, I forgot which park it was that Kathy was talking about. She'll probably chime in the chat. But it does go to the heart of the matter that, these are overlooked vulnerable people until they have to take residency in a park that's everyone else's green space that everybody wants them out of without solving the problem of why they got there, or demanding proactive solutions from our elected representatives to prevent this from happening. It's an epidemic. Homelessness, the lack of services, the lack of empathy. This woman who purports to be Sarah Lim, apparently the Tribune claims they got a hold of her. She was reached by phone late Thursday afternoon. She said she didn't offend anybody and was only seeking publicity. I have no hatred against homeless people, said Lim, who said she came up with the idea last week because she knows the encampment is controversial. People want something done about it, Lim said, of the homeless people living there. Yes, somebody made those flyers and made them look like official 5-day notices to vacate. That's what Alderman Haddon said. Now, I was curious about Haddon's, obviously Maria Haddon has had to kind of get involved in responding to what's going on here. And from my understanding, and I'm not completely right because I'm just coming into looking at her record now, she seems to be, let me pull up the Twitter feed because I wanted to research like what's her record here and why does everybody want to like throw dirt on her given how she replaced Joe Moore, who was not doing good things in that ward. And sorry, it's taking I don't know why my screen's taking so long to come up here, but give it just a moment. Lainie, what are some of your thoughts on Maria Haddon before?
I don't really know her that well. I mean, okay. I know a lot of people. I monitor a lot of neighborhood groups, and a lot of people don't seem to like her very much. But I mean, people tend to complain publicly more than they do say nice things publicly. So I don't know how helpful that is.
Now,
I do know there was an issue though. I think it's critical here. There was a problem when they announced that they were closing down the field house. The Park District announced they were closing down the field house because the homeless encampment had gotten too big in that area, which of course incensed the neighbors who would like to have access to the spaces that we're paying taxes for. And Chicago was, by the way, was built around, was designed to have a lot of green space for the people of this city. And I do remember was that Maria Haddon said that she didn't know anything about it, that the Chicago Park District was passing the buck. She didn't understand what was happening here, and both sides were blaming each other. So on one hand, of course, this could be absolutely sincere that Alderman Haddon was blindsided. The other possibility is that neither party, neither the alderman or Chicago Park District wants to take responsibility for this situation, so they're just blaming each other as a diversion. I don't trust anybody right now. When the city cannot figure out which lands belong or under the jurisdiction of which department, and meanwhile you've got a homeless encampment throwing raw sewage into our water systems, what the heck?
This was some of the stuff I found about her record on Twitter, though. She was awarded September 27th with the Community Champion Award. Is presented to Chicago 49th Ward Alderwoman Maria Haddon. Some of the other stuff that comes up on Twitter, she is the winner of the Community Champion Awards, a strong supporter of a reestablished Chicago Department of Environment and an ally to Southeast Side environmental justice communities. She pushes for healthier communities in Chicago. And now here's a tweet complaining about her. These are the quote defund the police aldermen in Chicago, vote them out. Now she's on this list along with Rosanna Rodriguez Sanchez, Andre Vasquez, Scott Waguespack, Byron Joe Lopez. There's Maria Haddon right over there. So yeah, as I was looking at, look, anybody that could replace Joe Moore and is a friend of environmental justice, I think is valuable in that community. I'm sure Kathy might chime in the chat regarding things I'm not aware of, because she's very, integrated into what's happening in that community, that side of town. But yeah, it's all just very, very, very curious. So Kathy mentions in the chat, it's the Lorelei single residency occupancy that she was getting into it with the Kappelman about, as far as relocating people that were forced out of that SRO. They gave them $2,000 to get out and for moving expenses. And who knows how many of them are relocating to these tent cities everywhere, because it's not a real solution.
No, it's not a real solution. And SROs had a purpose. They continue to have a real purpose all around the country, and they kept on getting closed down. But then all of a sudden, you have so-called homeless shelters popping up with people getting grant money and people getting jobs as administrators, and homeless people get a bed rather than a room, and they get a bed in a room with a bunch of other people. They get a lot of restrictive rules and conditions, including that prevent them from getting a decent night's sleep or being able to go to jobs that work at night, that require them to work at night. And that's what happens. How convenient.
I went over to the Chicago subreddit also just to see what some of the chatter was about people's thoughts on this quote unquote DePaul student. A lot of people think it was just a stupid stunt. At first, I thought Carsala's guy in Westtown. At first, I thought there was more to the story, but honestly, it just seems like this girl is just a complete and total idiot. Like, how sheltered of a life do you need to live to post up flyers to a homeless camp promising beds at the Four Seasons while you're attending DePaul? And your reasoning is, I wanted to drive more traffic to my website to go viral. This girl is a dumbass. Kind of responding to what Ed's point was about, the sociopathy question.
I would like to know where the hell she lives. I mean, that's pretty far north from DePaul. I mean, it's not near DePaul. And, to go to all, I don't know, man, this is weird.
One other funny comment from Julius Pepperwood Chai. I'm imagining the professor going on some rant about how ineffective Lori Lightfoot is mayor, and then saying sarcastically to a random student in the audience, hell, you'd be a better mayor. And this Lim girl took that way too seriously. Some good stuff on the Chicago Reddit. Anyway, we can move on to the story. Ed, is there anything else you wanted to share on your thoughts regarding this before we move into the next segment?
Just that the main reason I brought up that is that I think we got to be careful when we're talking about college students and whether we think they're like full.
It's an opinion.
Full bore sociopath. Yeah, I understand. That's what's fine. I'm just saying. Like I said before, these kids don't have fully formed brains. Their cognitive abilities and reasoning may not be at their 100% capacity. So while it may seem like a good idea to get lots of traffic to your website, they're not thinking about the consequences.
But at 17, 18, we hold those kids accountable at that age for other things, Ed.
Yeah,
it's just they're capable of committing crimes and being charged. So I would say
students, they go to parties, they drink a lot, they hang out with dumb kids, they do dumb things. I'm just saying that's got to be part of the mathematics that we're putting together here.
I think Ed
I just like to think
hard to give a lot of people benefit of the doubt, and I love that about him. I'm a little bit more cynical about it, and I think there should be some accountability. Yeah, she's obviously immature, and maybe we shouldn't throw around words like sociopath. It's an opinion, though. It's definitely sociopathic behavior because that's the lack of empathy for the people that you're taking advantage of to exploit for whatever other reason she claims that she was doing this for.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, one person makes like a huge mistake in judgment, and it's super public. And that could follow you forever.
Yeah, well, this is going to follow her forever. She's for real.
I mean, she's obviously going to get a lot of pushback, or whatever the word is, from this incident. Now, for us to make assumptions on her mental state beyond a reasonable, analysis, I just think is dangerous.
I guess I'm thinking from the perspective, too, as you're talking about this kids at that age, and are they sociopathic? Is it just bad judgment because their brains aren't fully developed? If I was a parent and I had a kid, I would certainly do my best to teach them better than to do something stupid like this. Because if they did it, I don't know that I mean, my response would be like, what are you thinking? Do you understand what it's like to be without a home? That you decide you're going to take advantage of it. I mean, there would be some repercussions.
I mean, absolutely terrible judgment here. I'm thinking, 50-50, a little from column A, a little from column B, and combined to be a giant cluster fudge.
I mean, that kid would go into some counseling, because that would indicate to me if they don't have a level of empathy that they would concoct something this diabolical to just bring attention to themselves. That's not just a lack of judgment, Ed. I think that there's potentially other things at play. I don't want to go off into a whole other detour here, but I watched that show on Netflix about Jeffrey Dahmer, which I thought was a pretty decent dramatization. And I think towards the end, they did give equal weight to the impact and the collateral damage affecting the families. But in Dahmer's case, he enjoyed taxidermying animals with his father's assistance. His father saw this kid take an interest in this, didn't understand the implications of how it can kind of disassociate the kid from, having a respect for life, didn't recognize that his kid had other serious mental issues to get him into counseling that contributed to this kid growing up into becoming a monster. I guess maybe parents need to be a little bit more attached to like what I sense would be some warning signs, trouble signs, red alerts into like making sure your kid has access to mental health and perhaps guiding them towards mental health services or assistance, because it's a difficult world we're growing up in anyway for them. One last thing. Let's
hope this kid, this kid's parents use this as the wake up call that it is. Then. Yeah.
One other comment that came from Alderman Rosanna Rodriguez. What they did to those neighbors in an attempt to hurt Chicago Alderwoman is despicable. We all need help with our campaigns, and if you have the capacity to give some shifts to Maria's campaign, it's important. We've made some people uncomfortable in our attempts to transform the way. So,
yeah, well, because she's seeing how Maria Haddon's reputation can be damaged by this too.
Yeah, which obviously this student had no thoughts about either. The impact there. All right, so let's transition into our next story, an interesting development in the race for the mayoral office of the city of Chicago. There's the mayoral clown car circling, and the next candidate to step out of the mayoral clown car, who's just been endorsed by Chicago Teachers Union, is Brandon Johnson. Now, this came from Crane's Chicago Business. Chicago Teachers Union endorses Brandon Johnson for mayor before he's even entered the race. Look, no one will judge you for using... Wait, what is this? I'm reading from the article here. That doesn't... Okay, sorry. There was something at the top of the article here that didn't really make sense to the story content. Anyway, there's Brandon Johnson. The Chicago's Teacher Union and influential progressive party United Working Families have officially endorsed Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson for mayor ahead of his expected entry in the race. And Ed, you and I were talking about his name recognition value not being very high, but maybe now with the CTU's endorsement, it will gain attention, because now, Chuy Garcia asked the CTU not to make an endorsement yet while he mulls over running, and they're like, nope, sorry, we're doing it. We got it. Yeah. According to a source, the CTU House of Delegates approved a resolution in support of Johnson by an overwhelming vote Wednesday evening. Johnson is also a former teacher who's worked for the union over the last decade as a political organizer. Last weekend, United Working Families endorsed a resolution urging Johnson, who is also a member of the party, to join the mayor's race, pledging their support. The United Working Families resolution says Johnson is not merely better than the alternative, nor merely values aligned, but is truly a leader in our party, including recruiting UWF members to serve in his campaign and develop his platform as he considers a run for mayor. Now, this is all good, but he's only like in the middle of his first term as Cook County Commissioner. And one of the comments I made on our last show was like, for him to jump ship from whatever good he's doing there, because suddenly this is opening up for him without the name recognition that I think is very valuable for anybody that wants to run against Lightfoot and her, what she's got in her campaign war chest. I don't know if this is like the greatest strategy. I'm glad that he's a leader, in everything he's done, and he's got the same values, that's not an endorsement for Chuy Garcia. And as you all know, I'm also a big fan of Jamal Green, who's actually been doing shit on the streets. He's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk, being involved in his communities. Johnson has hinted at a run for months, including repeatedly using the phrase "when I'm mayor" at a Northwest Side mayoral forum last week, but has not officially entered the race. The first-term county commissioner has promised progressive organizations he's a coalition builder that would invite them into his campaign to build a platform. He's also promised to run at the top of a ticket with like-minded aldermanic candidates. That's a strategy that worked on the Northwest side in the June primary, where progressives nearly swept every race they organized for, including State Representative Delia Ramirez's overwhelming defeat of Alderman Gilbert Villegas, 36, for the 3rd Congressional District. An up and down slate really helps us consolidate our resources and move a unified political message, United Working Families Executive Director Emma Tai said Wednesday. The point is not just to win, but to build power, build organizations, and shift the Overton window of what's discussed in Chicago politics. Thanks for that link, Ed. The 2 endorsements could help lead other affiliated unions and community groups to get on board a Johnson campaign. But U.S. Representative Jesus Chuy Garcia's indecision on his own run continues to give pause in the mayor's race. None of the political organizations that organized the mayoral forum last week have endorsed a candidate as of Thursday, and Garcia's looming candidacy is said to be a factor, according to a source. The CTU also endorsed aldermanic candidates Muez Bawani and Lori Torres, both CPS teachers, in their campaigns against Alderman Deborah Silverstein of the 5th and the aforementioned Villegas of the 36th, respectively. Now, Deborah Silverstein is my alder person, and I got to tell you guys, I don't have any complaints about her. When we have storms, when stuff's happening, I see her out in the streets doing stuff. Actually, I have respect for the fact that she seems very engaged in the community here, from my perspective, living here. Now, I don't know why CTU is endorsing these other 2 candidates against her and Villegas. That's something I should look into, and I will. But yeah, interesting developments regarding their endorsement. Lainie, do you have any thoughts?
I'm just really concerned that we're going to end up with a clown car like we had in the other mayoral election, where you have 5 million people running. And, then, granted, it was whittled down to the 2 candidates, but I'm just concerned that this is going to get screwed up again. And
yeah,
we're
too
going to
many
get
candidates. Yeah, too many candidates. Yeah. Those without name recognition, basically diluting attention to those that might actually have some kind of shot.
I personally happen to like Raymond Lopez. That's where I'm at with this.
I didn't do that. That's Ed.
What?
I didn't put that graphic up. That's Ed.
That's our Ray Lopez graphic.
I like him.
Okay.
But I mean, I just, this is just a dumpster fire of an administration at this point. I mean, I do feel sympathetic in that. First of all, I do think she got handed a stink bomb. And
she's off in Mexico now while this is going on here.
And you end up with a major global health crisis. We've got a freshman mayor, a freshman governor, with an utterly bizarre federal administration. And I'm sympathetic, but a lot of this has just really taken a nosedive. And it's very unfortunate.
Constipational Conservative joins us tonight. He says whomever the CTU endorses, don't vote for them. Those candidates will capitulate and the students suffer. I don't think so, Constipational Conservative. I do hope that they choose someone with better name recognition for the exact purposes of the fact that the CTU is doing more to serve the interests of the students. I don't think students are suffering under CTU. I think students are suffering under CPS and the mayor, and the fact that we don't have an elected school board here in Chicago where people can actually choose who's doing what, as opposed to the mayor just putting her flunkies in there who are just going to do what she wants all the time. Ed, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I know that we're likely going to see people using hashtag Let's Go Brandon for this guy, which could be confusing.
Lord. Poor guy.
Very confusing that could be for people. And then the other concern is, at least he's not doing like a soda tax right before an election. So he's got that going for him.
Yeah. True. Let me bring up our next story here as I look over to my alternate screen. I forgot my reading glasses. That's why I'm doing all the squinty stuff here. Okay, open it in a new tab.
So
I got it.
So although they endorsed him, he hasn't announced yet. So
Yeah, that's the thing. But now, isn't it interesting? Chewy is asking them to take their time to endorse somebody while he's mulling over his decision, and they don't want to accommodate that. While this guy hasn't even announced he's running. So
maybe that's a calculation that they don't want to deal with Chewy in this election, and so they prematurely endorsed him so that he would go away.
Who's got the name recognition, but unfortunately has the ties to the tentacles of the neoliberal Democratic machine and party.
Hanky. What does that mean, Vince? Hinky.
Oh, strange.
Weird. Well, don't you say strange or weird? I mean, hinky, that has no meaning.
We say hinky.
I don't want you guys using words around me that got no meaning.
So,
Because we got plenty of people in the clown car right now.
yeah, and that's going to dilute attention from getting, our favorite mayor, Lori Lightfoot,
What a fucking bitch, am I right?
out of office. That's one of our favorite drop-ins these days when we're not just Lori Lightfoot. We've dropped in when we're talking about ex-mayor Rahm too. All right, so let's move on to our next story. This comes to us from Recycling Today. Sims Metals, which is undertaking a $15 million investment and upgrade to its environmental control systems, receives the Illinois green light. State agency endorses metal recyclers emissions control system in Chicago. Curious. The Sims Metal business unit of Australia-based Sims Limited says the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency has granted its approval to issue a construction permit to the company for a proposed advanced emission control system at its auto shredding plant in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago. Interesting, because there weren't permits given to General Iron before they started construction. At least, Sims is like taking the extra step to try to protect their investment of starting work. They said, "We are pleased that after a very thorough due diligence process, that the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency has now endorsed Sims metals plans to enclose our metal shredder at all emissions points and add state-of-the-art advanced emission controls by approving our request for a construction permit," says John Glide, Sims Metal Global Chief Operating Officer. Now, I think the Illinois EPA also granted, I think they reviewed, was it General Iron? I know that the Illinois EPA looked at and approved something that the federal EPA came in and said, no, that approval shouldn't have gone in because, unfortunately, the green light that they were given actually wasn't well advised because they did end up polluting the community. Or did that have to do with the green light that they gave when they had the demolition for that? God, why am I forgetting? Remember when they collapsed that tower during the pandemic and it spread asbestos and dust throughout the community? That was in Pilsen. I'm just forgetting.
Oh yeah, that was awful. And
Yeah.
it happened. Yeah, it was awful. I mean,
And I think
and everybody stomped their feet, but
I'm bringing up the other tab here. So in response to this, that Sims got the green light from the Illinois EPA, we're hearing from MSN that Pilsen residents say they're not welcome. They demand the city rejects the permit for Sims Metal, cite lack of emissions data. And this always seems to be the heart of what ends up happening. There are these approvals that go through, and it seems like the real data is not in place to properly approve or reject what these companies that are polluting the environments close to residential communities are doing. Elementary school student Apollonia Jackson raised an orange inhaler into the air. "This is what keeps me alive," Apollonia 9 said into the microphone at St. Paul Catholic Church in front of hundreds of people seated at the pews before her. Apollonia and 13-year-old Joshua Graves led attendees in chants and calls to action at a public meeting Thursday night to discuss the pollution in Pilsen. "Let's tell the city, clean our air," Joshua said, as claps and shouts resounded through the church. Okay, this has been going on for like years now.
oh yeah,
The attention on what's happening in our southwest parts of the city where they relocate or they approve these metal scrappers, these recycling companies. The crowd demanded environmental justice for the Southwest Side, home to neighborhoods like Pilsen, where an industrial corridor borders the South Branch of the Chicago River, and residents have endured decades of pollution. The smelting company H. Kramer and Company contaminated the soil with lead, according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The Fisk power plant emitted high concentrations of carbon dioxide before it was shut down in 2012. Now, another battle wages against Sims Metal Management, which owns a scrap metal recycling facility at 2500 South Paulina Street. There it is in the shadow of downtown. Most recently, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency granted Sims a construction permit on September 15th to enclose the controversial shredder to reduce emissions from the facility. Meanwhile, Sims is facing ongoing regulatory action from the city, state, and federal government as community opposition to its operation grows. Last week, Sims began U.S. EPA-mandated monitoring of the air around the plant so the federal agency can measure its compliance with the Clean Air Act. Now, community members are planning a march to Sims's door. Sims's Metal is a division of Sims Limited. The metal recycler has more than 200 facilities with the operations in more than 15 countries, according to its website. The company had previous alleged environmental violations. In 2014, a Sims Metal facility in California was fined by the U.S. EPA for violating the Clean Water Act and pouring debris into San Francisco Bay.
Oh, great.
In 2018, the U.S. EPA alleged the Pilsen facility violated air quality laws by emitting fugitive particulate matter. Sims paid a $225,000 civic penalty. High levels of particulate matter can cause respiratory problems. In October of 2021, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul sued Sims for failing to show that it had reduced uncontrollable emissions in Pilsen. Raoul alleged that Sims's emission of volatile organic materials, which are harmful chemical compounds, violated the Illinois Environmental Protection Act. So when the residents of the community are demanding more data, I think that, they have a right to be concerned given these other oversights that led to these violations, polluting their community, polluting their backyards, and causing unhealthy, unsafe, and hazardous conditions for the people living in that community close to this recycler. Sims said in a statement that the construction of emissions controls represent a $15 million investment to be part of the environmental solution to pollution caused by industry. These significant upgrades to our environmental monitoring systems and the planned upgrades to our environmental control systems will allow us to continue being a good neighbor and provide industry-leading recycling services in Chicago, said Rael Hamilton Romeo, Global Head of Corporate Communications and Marketing for Sims Limited.
But at least they sound like they want to try to do something.
But they always do.
But the proof will be in the testing, right?
Yeah. Look at the laundry list from 2014 through 2021. Now, one other thing, Ed, and I'll pass it over to you and Lainie. Environmental activists say the construction permit granted by the IEPA is merely a Band-Aid on an area overburdened by a long history of pollution. See, this is the thing. They're doing this now. They're adding to the problem that's already there. I just don't understand why these types of recycling plants and that are causing all these environmental hazards aren't mandated to build or do whatever they're doing far away from residential communities where they're not near schools, they're not near where people live. And there are a lot of open areas throughout the lower part of Illinois and into Indiana along the southern shore of Lake Michigan that are unpopulated. We saw a lot of our steel mills and stuff. That this is so close to a residential community is really what is the cause for alarm, clearly, as these other things have happened. Some said they feel it represents a state agency giving the facility a green light to continue operating, while many in the community are campaigning for the opposite. They're not welcome in our community, said Reverend Emma Lozano, pastor of the Lincoln United Methodist Church, said at Thursday's meeting. Pursuing this construction permit was part of the interim order Sims entered into after the lawsuit brought by Raoul. The construction permit allows Sims to install equipment to reduce emissions. According to Sims's application filed to the EPA, the controls added to the shredder will significantly reduce emissions of particulate matter and volatile organic material. Will they, though? I mean, is this another case of where, they're making overtures and we're just going to, rubber stamp it until suddenly people come forward and say, hey, look, the problem's still here, at which point then, they've got a bigger problem on their hands.
And also the whole phrasing here is it will reduce emissions, meaning there still will be emissions.
Thank you, Ed. Now, the application did not outline a plan for measuring pollution in the community. There was no mention of noise or odor controls The new equipment will bring emissions of nitrogen oxides and carbon monoxide. After approving the construction permit, the Illinois EPA hosted a public meeting earlier this month to address residents' concerns and released a response statement explaining why the permit was issued. Importantly, the Illinois EPA does not have authority to review over land use and zoning decisions. For land use decisions within the boundaries of the city of Chicago, this authority resides within the city, the IEPA stated in the document. I just think that there's probably some pay for play maybe here. That's just my suspicion, allegedly. But yeah, now they're passing the buck to Chicago, which, passing the buck to Chicago where, someone's off in Mexico trying to court business to bring back. Doesn't have an eye on the ball with the stuff, whether it's the homeless issue, whether it's the environmental impact of all of these polluters being relocated to South Shore. Kit's been on talking about General Iron and what was the other? I think it was not General Iron.
And Mad Asphalt.
Mad Asphalt. Yeah, Mad Asphalt also polluting our southwest neighborhoods. Lainie, your thoughts?
This is something that it kind of hits home for me because I grew up with asthma as a kid. I mean, I grew out of it. But, we called it bronchitis. Sometimes it was called asthma. But essentially, it's a terrifying condition. And I really feel for these kids who are speaking up. When you can't breathe, that's terrifying. It's terrifying for anybody, but particularly for children. We know that asthma disproportionately affects poor children, particularly poor children of color. And there's, I think, ample evidence to point to environmental racism where certain facilities are. Now, curiously enough, I'm going to offer a counterpoint that came up back several years ago, even before the pandemic, when I was doing this reporting for Hard Lens and Chicago Corner. And I was talking about a case, it may have even been this, I'm not sure, but it was a facility that wanted to open on the south side. And there was some real concern, about the environmental impact. And I was talking about that. And a gentleman who actually lived in the community came back and said, well, back in the day, our community did have these industrial facilities and people had jobs. They had good jobs that were in the community. All those jobs, all those facilities, the manufacturing facilities started leaving the community. We became a bedroom community. We began to see the value of our homes plunge, and people were not able to get accessible jobs. And he said, so I understand about the concern about the environment, but our community needs jobs and opportunity. And I can't really argue with that concern either, other than to say, but asthma is still a thing. And that's also a concern. And so
farther away from the residential communities.
Commute
to those areas.
Well, but the point is that a lot of people can't commute that easily. And we have a public transportation system which doesn't work the way it should and really hasn't worked since the recent global health crisis. We know this has been an ongoing problem here. And so for me, it's like, yes, I would like to see industrial campuses located in various parts in and around the city with a fair berth between residential areas, and really focusing on creating really excellent public transportation options that can get people from door to door, in a relatively short period of time, so they can get back home and do what they need to do. And bring their paychecks home and be in their communities with their families while also providing accessible jobs. But that's going to require people to actually talk to each other, to start really planning on multiple levels to ensure that people can get to work quickly and easily, but also that jobs that are going to require probably the necessary handling and processing of hazardous materials and that will have environmental impact are located away from people where people are trying to live and breathe. So this is just, it's maddening that we keep on having this same thing happening over and over again when nobody's willing to talk about what's going to be necessary to make sure people have jobs, to make sure that these necessary businesses operate, but to also protect the health and safety of people who live in communities.
They're rushing through the health and safety. You know, as I think the big concern for the residents as a community also is they've been given this song and dance in the past. Oh, we did the test, we did the data, it's all fine, and then there's a toxic waste mess or air you can't breathe afterwards that causes the health problems. So it's like, yeah, all your points are very, very important about you got to create the jobs and stuff, but invariably, Lainie, it seems that the capitalist aspect of this is embraced before the people.
It is. I think that this is not something that's insurmountable. This is something where it requires planning. It requires working with the public, with the environmental protection agencies, city planners, land development, and public transit. And if that could be worked on together, I think that it could benefit a whole lot of people, but clearly nobody wants to invest in a safe, healthy solution for everybody.
No, they're in it for the quick buck and the fast progress or whatever what they consider progress, which really just means profit. And so,
their priorities are elsewhere in Mexico or overseas to help our tech incubators and you know.
I mean that they care about, but all the other stuff, it's like, oh, we'll just throw some duct tape on it, it'll be fine.
Yeah. Yep. I'm just getting new with this Rokfin thing. Unfortunately, I don't know how to pop up the comments, but I do want to acknowledge those of our viewers who are on Rokfin. Thank you so much for joining us there.
Thank you.
We're going to try to start weaning people off of YouTube and guiding you over to Rokfin so that we don't have to deal with all the appeals for copyright strikes and nonsense, fair use claims over here on YouTube. Want to thank in the chat over at Rokfin. We had Dick on Rokfin. We're going back a little bit, but some important points. USA could have built housing and jobs, but they decided to have 8 decades of nonstop warring for Exxon Shell. Thanks, Henry Kissinger, Trilateral Commission, Rust Belt offshoring. And now they have got us to World War III to give Exxon Shell the Europe gas market for their Qatarling. Let's see what else is in the chat over there. Miguel H is also over there. So thank you, guys. And remember, you want to support the show, you can tip us over on Rokfin, and we get a little bit more than the super chats here on YouTube. So that's another reason we're hoping to guide more people over to our Rokfin to help support the show. So I'm going to close that window there and bring up our next story before, Lainie, we're almost on time with that very welcome wine report. But before we feed ourselves with, self-medicating with wine, I want to quickly cover this story. Sure. It's really kind of an update to something we reported on earlier this year. That's kind of been out of spotlight, but thankfully back in the news, as it should be, in regards to the ongoing, what do we want to call it? The ongoing aversion to dealing with the gun violence epidemic, the numbness to the gun violence epidemic. This comes to us from Lynn Sweet and David Struett at the Chicago Sun-Times. The Highland Park 4th of July massacre, the first lawsuits have been filed. Call the attack predictable and preventable. It was. Suspect Robert Cremo III was ready to go to war, just as Smith & Wesson told him he could, according to suits that accuse the gun maker of deceptive and unfair marketing and also target others, including Cremo's father. I'm all for suing the gun manufacturers here. And you know what? This Jagoff's father who decided to go and sponsor his... I think that there are, before I get into the article, I'm going to go off here, two parties that were clearly negligent in this. His father, who knew his son had a mental health issue. I mean, the kid had threatened the family. And the Illinois State Police, who, looking at the father's sponsorship for the permit, also had access to the kid's mental health records and the police record and decided, well, this guy's, he's an affluent white guy in Highland Park. He's vouching for his kid. Let's give him the gun license. Families of 3 people killed in the Highland Park 4th of July parade massacre and dozens who were wounded filed suit Wednesday in Lake County against gunmaker Smith & Wesson, 2 gun stores, the man who's been charged in the shootings, and his father, accusing them in part of violating Illinois consumer laws in the lead up to the attack. You know what? I don't know if they have a right to go after the Illinois State Police who approved the permit, because we have background checks in place to prevent people like Cremo from getting a permit despite the fact his father sponsored him. That's what I'm a little bit curious about. But according to the article, our legal theory on the complaint is that this was predictable and preventable, said attorney Anthony Romanucci. I've had an experience with Romanucci and Blandon, whose Romanucci and Blandon law firm is part of a legal team filing 10 lawsuits on behalf of more than 40 individuals or states, asserting the shooter was the type of a young consumer susceptible to Smith & Wesson's deceptive and unfair marketing and was enabled by his father. The civil lawsuits now pending in Lake County are separate from the criminal charges that shooting suspect Robert Cremo III faces and assert the defendants violated the Illinois Consumer Fraud Act, which prohibits consumer fraud and deceptive practices. An 11th lawsuit was filed by another legal team for a plaintiff, and the 12th case representing another person shot dead will be filed at a later date. All the lawsuits, which could have wider implications for gun makers, were filed against the following parties. Smith & Wesson, the maker of the MP15 line, the assault-style weapon used in the July 4th attack. The gun maker, the lawsuit said, markets its assault rifles to young, impulsive men by appealing to their propensity for risk and excitement, and I would also say small dicks, by maintaining an active presence on social media using violent video games, including ones played by Cremo, and social influencers as marketing tools. I'm going to say this. Let's dump the video game argument out the window. I play violent video games, and I'm 56 years old. I've played them all my life. It's a release. I know the difference between what I'm playing and deciding, oh, I can go out and do this in real life. And that's the disconnect in the parents of this kid, Cremo, who knew that they had a mental case in their household and didn't do anything about it. All the signs were there, right? Parents who are looking at kids in their households, completely disconnected. It's not my fault. I've got my kids, not my problem. As you know, we could also go in maybe a level with our first story with what was that DePaul students, how would they manage this kid who doesn't seem to have any empathy? And it's the disconnect of empathy here in all these cases that is at the heart of the mental health issue. The parents in the Cremo case, they knew their kid had mental health issues that were untreated. And so, let's dismiss it and say, oh yeah, go get a gun. I'm sorry, I'm going off and filibustering, but for Smith & Wesson, the younger the shooter, the better, the lawsuits say. They say the gun maker's marketing campaign continued even though Smith & Wesson knew or should have known in the last decade mass shooters have used Smith & Wesson weapons as their weapons of choice. They also assert Smith & Wesson fraudulently markets its MP line as, quote, used or endorsed by the military, suggesting that the weapon will allow civilians to act like service members and engage in combat. Mm-hmm. The gun maker facilitates violence for profit, those suing say, with marketing and promotion. Bud's Gun Shop in Lexington, Kentucky, an online gun retailer, and Red Dot Arms, a gun store in Lake County, where in July of 2020, Cremo, then 19, picked up the Smith & Wesson MP15 ordered from Bud's Gun Shop. Cremo III, who is being held in a Lake County jail on 117 charges of murder, attempted murder, and aggravated battery. He turned 22 on September 20th. And Robert Cremo Jr., who signed the papers needed for his son because he was a minor to purchase a weapon. The senior Cremo enabled the shooter's thirst for violence by sponsoring his FOID application, despite his knowledge that the shooter was disturbed and threatened violence, the filing state. The father, the lawsuits say, cleared the way for his son to obtain a weapon despite the younger Cremo's past threats to kill his family and himself. By the end of July of 2020, the lawsuits say Cremo, although still a minor, had the Smith & Wesson rifle used in the July 4th attack, his first gun purchase, as well as Kel-Tec Sub 2000, a Remington 700, and a shotgun. The lawsuits say that each of those being sued enabled the shooter to carry out the massacre on July 4th, 2022. Again, I ask, the Illinois State Police, who had his background check, also authorized the application for the FOID card. So I think there's somebody missing in this lawsuit. But a link to the article and the update on the case finally going forward, the lawsuits finally going forward, are in our show notes and our description link. I want to pass it along to Lainie and Ed for some of your thoughts on this. Lainie, why don't you start? Where do you start?
Where do you start with this? I mean, this is one of the things that I have encountered. I'm going to say this, and I'm not defending the parents here. All right. This is not in a defense. They should never, ever, the father should never have sponsored this application. The mentality here is wow. What I can say is that I think that families are often very poor judges of the mental health of other family members. Part of it is they may be in denial. It may be something that is that is within the entire family, and there's just that complete inability to see what is playing to everybody else around them. And I think this is one real problem with our lack of mental health supports in this country. And you're putting this on to people who are too close to the situation, who may themselves be part of a family culture where these behaviors and these states of mind are accepted as normal. Parents are in denial because of issues of shame, and they're not the best judgments. And the other point I would make is that even in families where it is recognized that a family member has mental health issues, there's often very little that can be done because of the way the mental health system works. That if you've got a family member who is out of control, there's often very little that you can do to help them if they are not willing to participate in getting help. And even if they are, getting help is extraordinarily difficult.
I want to interject one to your point. I am very close to a party that had an issue with a teen in their family having the kind of mental health issues that needed addressing. And I'm not going to say it wasn't difficult to deal with, but the parents in that household recognized it. And, whether the kid wanted the help or not, they got him the help. And I do think that, much in the way that Ed was, I think, giving that student at DePaul a little bit too much benefit of the doubt. I think too many parents shouldn't be parents, unfortunately. And I think the good parents would, and I know obviously everybody's not a good parent, but I do think, when you're talking of shame in the household and other factors that might contribute to them being, oblivious to the problem, everybody else is potentially going to be victimized or suffer because of their bad judgment.
Yeah. Yes. And I've seen this happen. I really have seen this happen. And it's, I don't know that there's an easy solution.
Well, I think in regards to this whole disaster that happened in Highland Park, this whole tragedy, the solutions are, if you're not, and I've said this before, and I know people might laugh at me, but I'm very serious when I say this. If you cannot prohibit the sale of violent automatic weapons to people because of the Second Amendment does not also allow you ammunition. Regulate the fuck out of ammunition. Seriously, because they can't come back and say, well, the Second Amendment doesn't give you the right for ammunition. We're going to do background checks for the ammunition. If you say you want the ammunition to go to the target range, you'll be rationed a certain amount to go do your target shooting. That's fine. Plus, my whole perspective on, I'm not anti-gun so much as I think people have a right to a handgun, a rifle to hunt, maybe a handgun for home protection, so long as they get the background checks. These automatic weapons, it's out of control. That's where the disconnect is. It's like, if you, on one hand, if you say, no, we're going to ban all guns, bad guys are still going to get guns and terrorize people. That's why it's like people should have a right to have a gun in their home, a handgun, not a MR-15 or whatever this is that's clearly designed to mow down a crowd without any sportsmanship or aiming or anything. It's just a weapon of violence. A handgun is a weapon of protection. A rifle, a single-shot rifle, is a weapon of hunting and perhaps home protection. I think that, and when the founders of our country, wrote our rights, to form a militia, the whole point of the Second Amendment is to form a well-regulated militia. People aren't purchasing AR-15s to form militias. They're purchasing them because they think they have a right, and they have a disconnect from the responsibility that goes with the accessibility of those weapons, and not properly doing the background checks as the state police let drop through the cracks with this kid to allow the sale of that weapon, despite the fact all the warning signs and the red flags were there. I mean, again, I think that the whole issue of more of our elected representatives are bugging them to say, you know what, why don't you start standing up and say we need to regulate the ammunition, since it seems the matter of trying to enact safe gun control laws are consistently subverted by the Second Amendment. Ed, what do you think?
I'm gonna throw out a little hot take here,
Okay.
and it is that assault weapons and antidepressants are a bad combination.
That's not. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a great hot take. Yeah.
And the reason I say that is from personal experience. I knew somebody who was on antidepressants, and it changed their personality. And another friend of mine who was also a friend of this person had told me they were told a story by this guy that is like, I went and did this thing, and it was like I had zero inhibitions. He's like, there are things that I went and decided to do that I would have never done while I was on, not if I were not on antidepressants. And I said, and that's not to say that not all antidepressants are helpful. I'm saying pay attention to what your kids are taking. Don't expect medical solutions like antidepressants to be the only thing that fixes what might be wrong with you or your kid.
They're not
Pay
a panacea.
They're not. And there's a stigma against mental health because as we were talking with Kira's guest on Tuesday, who was a mental health specialist, a lot of people, there's a stigma to mental health. It means there's something wrong with you. No, there's nothing wrong with you. Mental health is something that everybody struggles with just the everyday pressures in our lives. Embrace mental health assistance. Embrace it. And if it, of course, were more available to people, which is what Kira's guest was also talking about. But we have to get past the stigma of, really, really intense treatment that unfortunately doesn't happen because of what Ed's talking about, just prescribe antidepressants. That'll make everything go away. There are much deeper issues related to these mental health crises that people are going through that you can't just medicate away and think, well, that's going to take care of the issue. Lainie, I was also curious, Lainie, do you think I'm crazy with this regulated ammunition thing, or what are your thoughts on it?
I think there may be something to be said for it. The situation is so distressing to me. I mean, part of it is that I am a civil libertarian who, really does, and who really does believe in personal liberty. And I also feel like, look, it's been acknowledged how many times on Hardlands Media, and I think on this show as well, that the Supreme Court has ruled that the police do not have any obligation to protect individuals, families, or their property. They have no obligation to protect you. And I've been reading about this now, probably well over 30 years ago. That was
they
something
use that
that
as their escape valve, like the cops do all day. They use that as their escape valve, which is why you need to allow people.
They have no obligation to do that. And I'm saying, okay, if the police have no, because they're not private security, and they're not bodyguards. Okay, fine. But when you tell me that the police don't have any obligation to protect me, well, okay, what do I do against a bad guy? A gun is one way that people who are physically not able to defend themselves ordinarily against an aggressor can equalize the situation. No, I don't have a gun. I don't want a gun in my house for a variety of reasons, but that it's there. And so that's always been it's been a real sticking point for me. But as you've pointed out, there's a difference between a handgun, or even a shotgun or something like that, and one of these semi-automatic weapons. And that's where my issue is. But going even past that, I've got real issues with giving gun permits to people who have a history of mental health issues or a history of violence or antisocial behavior. I've got real issues there, and there's so much to unpack. And
there is, and that's why it's like I always preface: I'm not a gun. I don't like guns, but I'd rather go train and learn how to use a handgun or a rifle. Those two weapons that are not automatic. Understand how to use them. Undergo a thorough background and mental health check if I want to own one to protect myself within my home. I have no problem with that. That's not unreasonable to ask anybody who wants the responsibility of carrying a weapon to protect themselves. But the line gets crossed when it's in all these automatic weapons of war. Yeah, okay, so Smith & Wesson advertises those weapons as military weapons. They're not. They're clearly trying to appeal to a mentality of, some stupid kids are like, ooh, I'm playing.
Or thinks he's Rambo.
Call of Duty. Yeah. And it's ridiculous. There's no need for those weapons, because you know what? Even if you have one of those weapons and you think you're going to rise up against the government, good luck.
No, it's not going to happen.
Good luck with that. They will drone you before you can even get to your locker or wherever you're stashing your AR or whatever, under a mattress or in your closet. So
yeah.
Some comments in the live chat. Hobo Rody, shotgun is dangerous. Get a revolver. Yeah. I saw this other comment by Hobo Rody that was very sad. Talking about hormones and mental health and medications. My friend's daughter got a birth control RX. 3 days later, she was hanging from the fig tree. Hormones matter.
Yeah, and and interestingly enough, I have known some people with mental health issues, women who have used birth control, and it was one of the best treatments they had for their mental health issues. But it can work both ways, absolutely.
All right, let's put that one to bed and get into Lainie's corner. Lainie's Everybody pour yourself a glass of wine after all of the things that are stressing us out that we're talking about tonight, trying to find solutions for, but are always challenged and probably need to self-medicate when the answers are not that easy to come by.
Well, while I do support the legalization of cannabis, I was always suspicious when it started to be decriminalized, particularly on the state level, because I said, look, we're in this huge mess. We're in this society in which people, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. We've seen crumbling infrastructure. And what do? Well, they decriminalize pot so that people can smoke themselves into a stupor. And again, I don't use it myself, but
I don't either.
It was one of those, and it does help some people. And if people use it for recreational purposes, it's certainly, in my opinion, no worse than alcohol, and which I promote regularly. But in any case, I do have something to say about that. But I did want to, as the solution and the cause of all our problems.
And I actually had a very, very robust debate with both my parents, who are very, we were talking about, I think, cannabis laws and how they're so against it. I'm like, but you're okay with alcohol. Yeah, but that doesn't really harm you. And I'm just like, are you kidding? It destroys your liver. It kills your brain cells. And why are you also okay with tobacco?
What about drunk driving, folks? Drunk driving, how many people? How many lives have been destroyed? Alcohol is what it does to marriages?
Anybody that I know who uses cannabis, and it's a handful, and I've never used it in my life because I'm just not interested. I've never seen them get violent. It chills them out. Unlike alcohol that can make you into a mean drunk or a happy drunk. It's the mean drunks you got to watch out for. And as far as the health issues and the health risks, I think that tobacco from cigarette smoking is going to cause much more damage than cannabis, which actually has medicinal uses. But this has to do with the brainwashing of the culture, Lainie. My parents, I respect their opinions and observations about this, but I pointed out to them the reason cannabis is normally criminalized and outlawed is because they don't know how to tax it, because you can grow it in your backyard. It's harder for you to have, a distillery in your garage to make alcohol, or, access to have a tobacco farm in your backyard to create cigarettes. They can tax that stuff. The reason they criminalize cannabis is because it's easier for people to get their hands on, or maybe just, grow themselves, and can't have that. Can't have that.
Well, what I can say, I want to get back onto my wine report,
yes,
but I would point out is that there is some connection between cannabis use and paranoia. So, I've known people who have, that is their situation.
That's true.
So I tend to be a little suspicious of some of the claims, the benefits of cannabis, but we'll put that aside for right now.
What are you saying? You saying I'm paranoid, Lainie? I'm not paranoid.
Yeah, I think the basic situation is that because they made it illegal for them to even do medical research on it, it's going to take a while for the U.S. to catch up to other countries as to all the benefits that cannabis can have medically for people. A lot of people are using it for chronic pain and other issues like that. And so I'm glad it's legal. I'm not a regular user of it either. I don't have the money. I don't have the budget to be a regular user of that stuff. I need all my money, all the money I have for pizza ingredients, Jerry and Lainie.
That's Ed's escape. But speaking of self-medicating gently, let's get to Lainie's wine report.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, wait, so before we do, I need a refill. Hang on, everybody.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
I've only got
So-
water. I don't have any wine in the house, but I will take your advice in this wine report, Lainie, what I should
All
get.
right. So here's what's going on. One of my other media projects is that I have for the past, it's probably going on 18 months now, hosted a wine podcast. First it was called No Chalice Required, and then we rebranded as Chicago Wine Report. We're going to be heading on to local radio, WCGO Radio, as a matter of fact,
Congratulations.
starting on
Nice.
October 16th, and doing a local wine report in Chicago. Now, the cool thing that's been happening in Chicago over the past few years is that there has been this incredible resurgence of wine culture, both at regular restaurants, but also a lot of specialty wine shops and wine bars popping up all over the place. So I put out this report. It's both a newsletter and a podcast moving to radio. And I wanted to get them on the show and talk to people in Chicago and let people know what's happening with the wine scene in Chicago, give people a little bit of a break here, and point out some really good opportunities to expand your wine palate, enjoy yourself, get to know some great people, some great local businesses. And a lot of these businesses are very small, family owned, and they really offer some special experiences. So first thing I wanted to point out is you can actually go over on Substack, the Chicago Wine Report.substack.com. I've got a free newsletter and podcast you can sign up for right there. And that comes out about once a week, roughly once a week, with information about wine events. I've got my field reports. We check out new places and establishments and recommend wine. We do wine reviews. And so it's just kind of a way to introduce people to what's going on in the wine scene here. Also want to point out at the top of the site, you look at Chicago wine resources, and where I'm putting in lists, just have one list right in there right now, but it's we're going to be adding more lists of shops, wine bars, places that deliver. Right now, we have a whole list of regular wine bar and bottle shop tastings. So what's going on is that many specialty wine stores and wine bars are hosting regular tastings. Many are free. Others are low cost, sometimes $5 or $10. And it's an opportunity to really expand your palate and check out different kinds of wines, sometimes wines that are quite expensive or costly per bottle. And it's an opportunity to try them, get an idea of what you might like, and to meet some really, really nice folks. Many of these places will also, during their wine tastings, if you want to buy a glass of wine or if you want to buy a cheese plate or something, you can do that. Fantastic opportunity. So I thought I'd just go over some of my favorite options here. Some of these places I've not been to, but I'm aware of. And there are wine places all over the city, including the new place down in Bronzeville, Chicago Winery. Bronzeville, I think it's Bronzeville Winery, and it's getting incredible props for its food and its wine and its events. But in terms of places that are actually having regular tastings, down in Hyde Park, 57th Street Wines is offering tastings on Thursdays and Saturdays. And, great opportunity for choosing a wine for, say, Friday night, or if you're heading out for the weekend, check out the wine tasting, pick up a bottle, take it with you. Augusta Food and Wine in Lincoln Square has, and this is one of my favorite wine shops, is offering free tastings on Thursdays between 6 and 8 p.m. They're bringing in some really excellent wines. Also, Augusta Food and Wine is owned by a guy named Shad Martin. He has trained academically in terms of cognitive, the sensory studies and cognitive, the ways in which we sense things. And he is an excellent food pairer, and he's trained his staff with that as well. So if you're looking for a food pairing, they can really help you out. They also have an amazing selection of non-alcoholic beverages, one of the best cheese cases in Chicago, nuts, snacks, gourmet items. It's just fantastic. Bottles Up in Lakeview. They are doing, they're doing first Friday of every month. They have a tasting, a free tasting, and they're also putting in new artwork by local artists every month. Door 24 in Bucktown holds another free tasting from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And you can just head on in there and try some wines and buy some if you like. In Fine Spirits in Andersonville, they're doing Wednesday and Saturday tastings. Conbini and Campai, which is one of Kit Cabello's favorite places. They are doing a lot of regular tastings, including wine, whiskey, and sake tastings.
Ooh, sake. I like sake.
Yeah, and there's a lot of places that are doing a lot more with that. One of them is a place called, and actually it's in Lincoln Square. I have to get it on this list. Rockwell Bottle Shop and Coffee has been doing a lot with sake lately, and they've been doing some tastings, but they're not. I don't think they're holding regular tastings. Independent Spirits in Edgewater, 5 to 7 on Thursdays. Picnic Wine and Provisions, that's in Rogers Park. That is one of the most lovely little shops and wine bars I've ever been to. I was there on Sunday, and got to meet some of the friends, some of their regulars there. And before we knew it, people were pulling up bottles of wine and giving us free glasses. We brought some snacks and we were sharing with them. And it was a very much it really felt very at home there. It's a great addition to the community. Red and white wines. If you're looking for wine that you're not going to find easily in other places, looking for very esoteric wines, Red and White Wines is fantastic. On Saturday afternoons, $10, you can go in and try wines. These are wines you're not going to find anyplace else. These are very exclusive wines, very difficult.
You're not going to find them anyplace else. Are they expensive wines? What makes them difficult to find elsewhere? Are they like boutique labels? Because you're educating me. I don't know a whole lot about.
So, Red and White Wine specializes in what's called natural or low intervention wines, and that's kind of become a trendy label these days. There's no there's no government label or restriction on use of the term natural wine. It's kind of like when I see people say that they have a natural food. That means nothing. But what these are wines where the winemakers don't do a lot of interference. So they're not adding yeast. They're using natural yeast that's in the air for fermentation. They're not adding, there's a chemical called Big Purple. It's a flavoring agent that's added to a lot of commercially produced red wines, particularly some of the darker red wines, to give it a really full flavor. And it's perfectly legal. But some people don't want any of that kind of intervention in their wines. So Red and White, their buyers are really scouring the market for unique wines that are being made in usually small production all over the world. Emphasis on France, but all over the world, but without a lot of intervention. And in some cases, for example, these winemakers, and this has happened at a couple of tastings that I've been to, where because they don't use fertilizers, they don't irrigate their vineyards, they're not using fertilizers or pesticides, they've lost their entire wine crop. And they've ended up having to buy grapes from friends. And this is something that happens a lot. So you're not going to get the same thing. You're not going to have a consistent product. Like a lot of wines, like mass market wines, I'm not saying they're bad, but from year to year, vintage to vintage, they're tasting the same. And they're able to do that because of the way that they're producing the wine. With a lot of these other companies or these small little vineyards that are doing low intervention, you're not necessarily going to have that level of consistency. So it's an adventure every time you open up one of these bottles.
Now, you shared a story with me when we were text messaging before the show about things we were going to cover tonight, about an experience you had that you were very excited and giddy about. I think you shared it on social media, where you were able to tell us. Somebody challenged you.
So what happened is this is okay. So there's a fantastic new wine bar in Chicago called Lainie, and it was formerly Joe's Wine Cellar in Wicker Park. Joe sold it to a couple of folks, including Seth. Forget Seth. I apologize if I forget your last name, but also Craig Perman, who owns Perman Wine Selections. And they decided to transform it into a place called Lainie, and kind of did redecorate it, redo the menu, the vibe, and everything. And they're just a wonderful, wonderful team. I was able to go in there and was just blown away. The place, first of all, was packed, which I was thrilled to see after being closed for a while. But during the evening, I was talking with Seth. We were having a nice conversation. I said, look, just give me, I need a glass, but you pick it out. You pick it out for me. So he came back with a glass and he said, where do you think it's from? So I stuck my nose in it. To do the sniff properly, first of all, you sniff without swirling. So you sniff, you swirl, you sniff again. And then I gave it a taste and I said, okay, I said, this is South Africa. And he got this look on his face, and it was from South Africa.
So how did you do that? I mean, obviously you're very an expert taster, but that's so specific a country to like taste the wine and know what's in the flavor or the flavor. Oh, your kitty's having a good time.
He's having a great time. Whenever I'm doing a Zoom call or a show or something, he wants to be right here. I don't fully understand it. But there's a characteristic. There's a certain characteristic. There's a floral characteristic. There's kind of almost a little sweet characteristic that I will pick up. Oh, hey, Oreo. That I will pick up with South African whites, and this was a South African Chardonnay, and it was lovely, but very different from what I would get from France, which might have more of a green apple quality because they don't always they don't necessarily oak their stuff. In the U.S., if you're going with a traditional oaked California Chardonnay, you're going to pick up more vanilla and a little bit more butter. But this South African is a very distinctive quality. And so I was able to pick that up, and I was kind of happy about that.
So how many years have you been wine tasting to really fine tune your senses there?
I started with wine probably in the early 2000s, and it was kind of something that I was doing for fun, but the wine culture was very different here in the U.S. Getting good wine, oftentimes required going to a very high-end restaurant or going to a very snooty wine shop. My friend Rodney Alex had started a shop called Taste Juicy Wine, Stinky Cheese in Wicker Park, and he was starting to bring some stuff in. And the thing is, Uncle Warren, okay, Merlot is actually a wonderful grape. It's one of the noble grapes, and it can be very dull, but it can also be absolutely wonderful. So in any case, then for a while I got off wine. I got into tea. I had a very successful tea blog for a while, but I learned to really refine, to work on my palate. And then in more recent years, I've kind of gotten back more into wine drinking. So in any case, but what I was saying is that, this is, we've got all these really fantastic opportunities. I urge folks to look through these lists only because, again, for a few bucks or even for free, there are places all over the city where you can try wine. A lot of these tastings are on Thursday nights. Some are on Saturdays. Some are on Wednesdays or Tuesdays. And I went through some of my favorites there, but they're all over. And it's if you you can't or don't want to spend a lot of money on wine, you do have the option of being able to go out and try wine, talk to the purveyors. Oftentimes also with these wine tastings, they bring in representatives from the wholesalers, the distributors. So these folks really know the bottles and the manufacturers. Many of them have traveled and have met the wine producers and can tell you a lot about them.
Very good. I'm glad you. In the beginning of your wine report, it may have looked like I was not paying attention. I was listening to everything you said because I was trying to text my sister to tune in right now because she's a big wine connoisseur. I don't know if she got on in time. Stacy, if you're out there, hello, dear.
I've met Stacy. Hi, Stacy.
I've met Stacy. Yeah. And I was saying maybe she should talk with you more about wine since that's up both your alleys. That was very educational, especially the information about how you've managed to hone your senses.
Yeah, it is something that's not easy. You have to train it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is this: when it comes to training, the other thing that you can do is get your nose into flowers, into plants, into herbs. You'll start picking, like if you're working with vegetables, if you're working with fruits, if you're working with flowers, herbs, sniff them. Okay. When you're tasting things, pay attention to what you're tasting. And eventually over time, when you start with wine, in the beginning, it just tastes like wine, and it could be taste good or taste bad, but it tastes like wine. Eventually, though, you're going to be able to start picking those flavors out. And that can give you some real insight into the wine, where it's made, what the grape is, in some cases, even its age. That's the sort of thing you can do over time.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how different regions have these different flavor profiles. I can't do that with wine like Lainie can, because I just don't drink enough of it to be able to discern those many things. But I used to.
Ed knows city to city pizza, though. That's we've got.
Yeah, he does.
Well, I could describe styles and stuff, but what I was getting at is, for a little while I was ordering like dark chocolate that were sourced from cocoa beans from all over the world.
Yeah.
And you would get these chocolate bars, and there's no dairy in them. It's just sugar and cocoa solids and whatever percentage of solids to mass or to fat or whatever. And you would get to these 70% dark chocolates, and they're from all over the world. And each one tastes like night and day between the different ones. And you're like, if you were eating enough of those, you could probably figure out where they were from. And
absolutely.
I totally get what you were getting at when you posted that thing. I was like, yep. I'm like, Lainie's drank enough different wines that she could pick out exactly where they were from without too much trouble.
Uncle Warren has an important question in the chat, Lainie. I don't know if you saw it.
What is Lainie's opinion on Night Train? What food does it go with?
Go out and get those Totino's party pizza rolls.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and I found a way
pizza rolls.
And Jerry, just to remind you, we are now also streaming on Rokfin, and I finally figured out how to pop the chat out into its own window.
Thank you. Awesome.
So that's where we are. We had Dick on Rokfin saying, "Pass the Manischewitz for Jewish New Year." Yeah, that just happened.
Mazel tov, everybody.
Some of you will know that Manischewitz tends to be on the sweeter side. It's I don't know. It's got a mild flavor of Robitussin, mixed with just some wonderful grape flavor. Hey, it's a decent wine, And Dick on Rokfin again posting, I'm toasting the coronation of King Charles III with a glass of Harvey's Bristol cream.
Harvey's Bristol cream.
Oh, and then we got, did we see the $2 chat from Dominic?
Oh, Dominic, thank you. I didn't see that there. I didn't switch over. Thank you, Dominic, who is like one of the leading patrons of our show. We haven't forgotten the very, very substantial donation that Mr. Palella made to Chicago Corner for the work that we do here.
Yeah, Dominic says, wasn't when the Second Amendment was written, all weapons required reloading after one shot. Anything having more than one shot at a time is therefore a violation of the Second Amendment.
Good point.
It's an interesting argument.
Very. Regulate ammunition. Dominic, thanks for watching. And everybody, you want to start watching on Rokfin, we do have the link to Rokfin in our show description here on YouTube, so you can always jump over there. And it's kind of the same setup. It's just less censorship, more return for us for the work that we're doing here as we're trying to build our resources to provide more entertainment and field reporting and doing other stuff. Speaking of field reporting, there's the famous Jerry Vasilatos transition. I want to share this story and a congratulations to Block Club Chicago. They were awarded $1.6 million grant from McCormick Foundation to launch an investigative team. We get most of our stories and our sourcing from Block Club Chicago because we don't have an investigative journalism staff, and they do a great job over there. And I often think, when we're reading stories, is someone from Block Club Chicago watching us pissed off that we're, bogarting everything that they report? But I always make it a point of giving credit to the reporters from all the reporters from all the news sources that we share news from to comment on and analyze. And I was very excited to see that they were rewarded with this grant. It's going to make our reporting here on Chicago Corner a lot easier with the work that they do. Yeah. A new investigative team will work closely with Block Club's neighborhood reporters to root out corruption, wrongdoings, and inequality, particularly on the south and west sides. There's the Block Club Chicago team. I wonder if there's a way to ally ourselves with them in some way. Maybe have some of them on our. I think that they've got a show on WCIU.
I think Chicago. They do have a Block Club show. I'm wondering if there's a way for us to get a snark grant. We just got to figure out.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Who will fund us for that?
We're gonna snark grant. We're gonna get to grants in a moment. There's actually a transitionary element to my sharing this story with our final story of the night, which where we usually like to try to populate news that we share that's more inspirational and upbeat and helpful and problem solving. But let me go back to this article before we get to the last story I want to share. The McCormick Foundation announced this week it's awarded Block Club Chicago a 3-year, $1.6 million grant to build an investigative team to strengthen the scale impactful reporting in Chicago and Illinois. Other benefiting organizations include Capital News Illinois, Injustice Watch, and Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, Media, Integrated Marketing, Communications. Block Club Chicago is a reader-funded nonprofit newsroom dedicated to serving Chicago's neighborhoods. We'll use the funding to build an investigative team and deepen its coverage of Chicago's south and west sides. The new investigative team will work closely with the newsroom's neighborhood reporters and be positioned to act on tips and pursue longer lead, high-impact stories to improve government transparency and accountability. Hiring for the team will begin soon. I wonder how the kibosh on real-time police scanner transmissions that we reported on the other day is going to impact their ability to go out and hold people accountable. But I guess we'll see. When reporters are embedded in the communities they cover, they're able to report with context, respect, and deep knowledge instead of parachuting in. Block Club's reporters have proved time and time again that our ground-level approach builds trust with readers, leads to news that is more responsive to the community's needs, and offers a more accurate portrayal of our neighborhoods. That's Stephanie Lulay, Block Club executive, editor, and co-founder. Thanks to the incredible support of the McCormick Foundation, we're excited to give Chicago neighborhoods the dedicated investigative coverage they deserve. The team will build on Block Club's already impactful and award-winning investigative coverage, which in recent years uncovered the Loreto Hospital. Loreto? Do you say Loreto? I say Loreto.
I always said Loreto myself, but
okay.
Or Laredo, maybe, I don't know.
The Loreto Hospital vaccination scandal, which showed how the hospital funneled vaccines meant for Chicago's most vulnerable to some of the wealthiest parts of the city, including Trump Tower. Sweeping racial inequities in traffic stops and ticketing across Chicago. Massive flaws in the COVID-19 testing industry, showing how at least 4 testing companies took advantage of the pandemic and people in need, billing the federal government hundreds of millions of dollars for testing that often gave inaccurate or completely fake test results. I want to tip my hat to Block Club Chicago because they were the source when we were reporting on that.
Yeah, we did. We talked about it that night. I remember that.
They were a source of that reporting. Wrongdoing in Chicago's aldermanic offices, acting as a much-needed watchdog. Block Club Chicago's investigative reporting has changed laws and led to criminal FBI and state investigations, the closing of hundreds of questionable COVID-19 testing sites, and the ousting of top officials. We like that.
Yes, we do.
So yeah, I wanted to congratulate them on this. I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot of more great stuff coming from them now that they have the resources to actually go and investigate and become embedded in the communities that they're reporting on, that we also share.
Yeah, it's actually great news that they've got a larger budget for investigative reporting. That's better for everybody.
Yes, especially us.
Yeah, doesn't hurt us at all.
Yeah.
When we can get our own investigative team together, then, maybe we won't have to rely on more dealing with commenting on local news sources. But it's nice to have an alternative source like Block Club.
Yeah,
Chicago
it's not that we can't go out and do it. It's like, we need to get the resources or.
Well, we're only a handful of people here.
Yeah, we're a very
limited time and resources.
Limited time who've got regular jobs. Yeah. So,
yeah.
that's, anyway. All right. moving on from that, let me bring up our last story here. I didn't have it queued because I thought there was a video with it, and I was concerned that the video might suddenly start and interrupt the other stories we were covering. But as it turns out, there's no video. No, it's cool.
The WGN one?
Yeah.
I might have posted a separate video link.
Okay. Well, speaking of grants,
I can find it.
And Ed, thank you for bringing this to my attention, because as a small business owner with 2 businesses, I'm definitely going to reach out and see if I qualify for this to help, my activities in my businesses. So from WGN 9, Gaynor Hall and Chip Brewster, $10,000 for qualified Cook County business $10,000 grants for qualified Cook County business owners. Grants, you don't have to pay them back. $71 million from the Federal American Rescue Plan is being devoted to helping small business owners in Cook County through the newly formed Source Grow Grant Program. The program was announced Thursday at a morning press conference featuring Cook County Board President and Sugar Queen, Tony Preckwinkle. Sorry, I had to toss that little irreverent dig in. Now, I'm glad that Tony, if she has much to do with this, I mean, the funds were made available, and I'm glad that they're making sure that they're going to start this process by which business owners can benefit. Other county leaders, community partners, and local small business owners. According to a press release sent out by Preckwinkle's office. Oh, wait, is there a video?
Yeah, actually, I have it ready to go if you want.
Actually,
it's the same one that's embedded in there. I just got it.
All right. So, yeah, I didn't realize, you know what? The embed window did not pop up. So since I have it, since I have it up already, that's what she said. Let me start it here since we've got this thing ready. Make sure the volume's up. Okay, play.
Yeah, we can't hear it.
Oh, you're not hearing it?
No. That's okay. I can pick it up.
All right, you pick it up.
Small business
I'm
owners
hearing
in
it.
Cook County who are people of color and those with disabilities, women, veterans, and LGBTQ members can now get a financial boost.
Our Gaynor Hall is live at Halston and Maxwell to explain more on the Source Grow Grant Program. Gaynor.
Yeah, Pat and Dina, good afternoon to you. Cook County officials say this could be a life-changing opportunity for small business owners who were devastated during the pandemic.
Small businesses is what keep America going.
At Lalo's on Maxwell this morning, Cook County officials announcing the $71 million Source Grow Grant Program to help small businesses thrive.
Grow grants will help to close racial wealth and opportunity gaps by infusing small businesses with the necessary capital to scale their operations.
Along with the $10,000 grants, business owners will also get one-on-one advising. The program is targeting sectors hard hit during the pandemic, like hospitality and food service, retail, childcare, and social assistance, and prioritizing applicants from underrepresented groups, including entrepreneurs of color, women, veterans, members of the LGBTQ community, and people with disabilities.
We are really working towards that goal to ensure that Black and Brown and women and immigrant business owners really have what they need to be able to survive the devastation that we've gone through.
I know $10,000 grants like this will be a game changer for our small businesses.
The program is funded with dollars from the American Rescue Plan, and county officials say it will help fill the ongoing critical need, connecting small business owners to capital.
This is an exciting opportunity, not just to touch lives, but also to advance equity and grow the regional economy.
So applications for the first round will open on Monday. You can apply throughout the month of October, and those businesses should be notified early next year if they receive the grants. Reporting live from University Village, Gaynor Hall, WGN News.
So that's really good news. On the WGN website, according to the program's website, this is the criteria to apply. Be a for-profit business located in Cook County, Illinois, have less than 20 employees, have operated and conducted business since March of 2020, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, have experienced a decrease in revenue or gross receipts, increased costs, or greater financial insecurity due to COVID, all are welcome to apply regardless of resident or immigration status. Businesses that have previously applied or received other types of federal, state, county, or city grants are eligible to apply. I went to the website to see the documentation that they're going to require, and it seems that it's only as far as businesses' 2019 tax returns to show where you were pre-pandemic. So that's some good news for everybody.
Yeah, that could be helpful for a whole lot of people.
Absolutely. So actually, we came in at like a normal time tonight, only an hour and a half. I wasn't ranting and raving, take us to 10 o'clock or a 2 or 2.5 hour show. And normally, a lot of the time I do load up on a lot of stories. But this was,
it's almost 9:30.
No,
yeah.
it's not,
So
yeah.
like,
So
it's 9:30.
that's 2 hours, Jerry.
It's 2 hours.
That's the lead in the water, guys.
Yes, we're blaming the lead.
We're blaming the lead.
So yeah, that's our show. I would advise everybody that didn't tune into Tuesday's show. I posted a hilarious video on a breaking news story regarding Kit Cabello's clone, and that's all I'm going to say. Go to our YouTube channel. You can find it on our Rokfin also. We had a lot of fun Tuesday night at Kit's expense, and as much as we love Kit, it was a very funny segment. I go to it when I'm depressed just to like make myself laugh, because I love hearing Kira laugh also. But just entertainment value there.
And just a public service announcement. If you
Yes.
happen to be in a city outside of Chicago and you think you saw Kit Cabello, please contact us immediately. Do not try to engage with him. Don't approach him. He'll just run off.
He will be apprehended and brought back to the lab from which he escaped.
Now, if you're out in a city that's outside of Chicago enjoying a succulent Chinese meal, and you think you see Kit Cabello at the table next to you, do not approach.
Notify Interpol. All right.
Notify Interpol. Email Jerry at ChicagoCorner.tv.
Jerry at Chicago Corner TV. Lainie, any parting thoughts, things coming up you want to share with our audience to keep them in the loop on things?
You just encourage folks to keep in mind that, Chicago Corner is here at 7:30 p.m. Central on Tuesdays and Fridays, as well as Hard Lens Media, which is at 4 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday. We got new shows all the time.
And we hope to have Lainie back again, because I like the fact you had some extra time to come on Fridays to join Ed and I. It was a lot of fun, Lainie. Thank you for joining us. Ed, any parting thoughts?
Just make sure that when you're pairing pizza or bacon, that you consult with your wine expert, Lainie Petersen.
Yes.
Because she will give you the best possible suggestions for pairing when you are eating on Pizza Friday, and especially if you got your weekend bacon events. Typically, those are breakfast events. She'll let you know the perfect wine to pair with your bacon.
Important safety tip. Thank you, Egon. And to the rest of my viewers across the 77 neighborhoods and the 50 wards of Chicago, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Please, as you go into your weekend here in Chicago, make sure that you stay safe, watch out for each other, be vigilant, take care of each other, stay safe, and remember, if it's happening on the streets, you will hear about it here on Chicago Corner. We'll be back next Tuesday, where Kira McCown will be hosting the show with Ed, and I hope to join. And again, next Friday, where I will return either with Ed or with another co-host, maybe Lainie, maybe somebody else. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in tonight and joining us. And please, as always, stay safe, Chicago.
Get out. And don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.
You still here? It's over. Go home. Go.